pen name. This
I
one
can
has a
actually buy
whole
it from
white avatar.
I'm not shy or anything, but why do you feel?
It's streaming, so people that just all the people that join in.
Hey, what's the high note?
I mean, no one's in there, but I'm gonna post a recording so you can say hi. Yeah.
So tell me what to say hi.
You can talk now. It's recorded. It's blue.
Hey everyone, this is Kerry-Ann, and we're here chatting with the people. It's a little early, Mom, until the hostess with the mostest really arrived. So I'm going to introduce the people. We have Alyssa, who is the sugar and spice. So, you know, Shari is the spice because she represents Grenada, and Alyssa double represents Guyana and Jamaica. Is soon to be on Team Carry-On, friends. He knows it, I knows it, we'll discuss it further. Joanna, the travel hostess with the mostest. She has so many travel experiences and enough to read our blog. And O'Neill over there, so soon to be on Team Carry-On, friends. And he's the producer with the mostest, Revolution Radio. And we're just kind of chatting and talk about, you know, engagement in the Caribbean community and how opportunities by whether tourism boards or other companies, they're looking for people with large followings because let's be real, it's a numbers game, right? But we know that our audience connects with us in different ways. And I was just sharing that the other day. I was in my feelings about something, or I was like, oh, I'm tired. And almost always Joanna says, like, she doesn't send me a text, but she tweets something. I needed to hear this today. I'm like, let me go find out what she needed to hear. And almost always have to listen to it. Yeah, maybe you hear this. No, it's serious. It's so, but those are like community engagement because they resonate and they feel it. And I think the challenge we have is that I don't know how we articulate it to brands that or community is communicating with us offline. Yeah, that is where they prefer. So it is. Listen, we love what Major Hype does. We love what everybody else does, but videos, I never comment. Does it mean that I don't see it? No. Yeah, like, why am I commenting? Like, he's not going to respond to me, so I'm not going to comment. But I'm going to like it so he could get the likes on it, and I'm getting reviews, but I don't want to engage because there's nothing for me to say other than maybe I say, ask Joanna, ask somebody, look at this. But I don't usually have to do that because y'all going to see it anyway.
One thing that me and us always talk about is the term engagement. What does that mean? Realistically, on social media, it's going to be a like, a share, or a view, or a comment. And that's it. If that's as far as engagement is going to go, I don't think brands are getting their money for it. I think that needs to be a reevaluation of what we see as engagement. Our community, like you said, we want to engage offline, like speaking person to person. Is what we do best. You know, and it's being able to quantify that. That's hard.
Yeah, because as Caribbean people said, the spirit have to take you. And you can't take somebody's spirit unless you're personally, you interacted with them personally to a certain point. So yeah, it's very hard, you know, and you know, sometimes you get trapped in, oh, everybody have big numbers, I want big numbers too, but when you get the feedback and the comments and you see how people receive it, then that's like, even if it's just one, and I literally need one person say, oh, this was great. I'm like, just one. That's all it is. So
I was gonna say, maybe we can also think about how we can figure out how to engage our audience. Like maybe put a question in there or put some type of thing in there.
Call to action. It's always there. I'm talking my person, and some people might respond, but again, we're also at the disadvantage of how the algorithms work. And so I have two separate profiles. I have my personal profile and I have, you know, the brand profile. And I make sure that I'm not really following celebrities on my brand profile because I need to see the people who are not celebrity who are following me so their feeds show up, you know, whatever they're posting shows up on my timeline so I can engage with that versus a celebrity who has someone posting for them on the regular who can kill my feed with all this stuff. And some people will answer, some people will not. And after a while, people don't really go on Instagram to read and respond to any questions. They just like, they just want to be entertained, see what somebody they wear, who telling some joke, they're not really there for that. So it's almost like I'll do it just for consistency's sake, but when you see like it's diminishing returns.
Yeah.
I have a question. So do you think because our countries aren't as technologically advanced, we didn't grow up with this technology phase, is this one of the reasons why our community doesn't use technology to communicate as much?
No, that's not it. We don't like it, period. And I mean, they do engage. Look at what they engage, where it is like rather something major high. If it's comedy and entertainment, if it's like a high entertainment value, they will engage. If it's anything lifestyle-ish, if it's some fashion or something, maybe, right? But it depends on who, because Mikelah posts when Spice was at BET Awards, and she gets some likes, but if somebody else does it, you know, I can't tell what the formula is. I really just feel like if you're, I'm gonna say this and people are not gonna be happy, but you know what? Caribbean people are wagons. Like, no, they're wagons. Like, you know, so, and I'm gonna use
You got an engagement right there. Someone is gonna be like, no, I'm not.
Yeah, no, right. But look at Spice, right? Apparently Spice had said she can't go no further in Jamaica and she got come under the love and hip hop, right? And she, all the way facts, right? And then when she come up with love and hip hop and she blow up, wait, listen, she made whatever you what I don't really watch it, but whatever you feel like she's doing on love and hip hop, she is one accomplishing the goals she set out to do. One and foremost. What happens is, let's say Spice is some collaboration or something. That's when people start criticizing. But you didn't want her to come to Atlanta in the first place to do what she had to do. So it's like you're in a rock hard place. Lead on the person do something and then people say I'll sell out. Then which one you want me to do? Because if I stay here, you're not really giving me the love. And when I move, you're going to tell me something sell out. And that's where a lot of us, and then in some cases, you don't get no forward from your community until somebody else give you the forward. People, somebody else is going to acknowledge and recognize you. From here, but like if New York Times or somebody else feature me, oh, I want to do it on Yardy, and that's how we do it. And it's almost like we have to do all of this. That why one of people could just recognize I've been doing this.
I think it's how I don't have the answer.
To me, it's you have to connect with both offline events and online events, because a lot of them people are will more engage with you if you focus offline.
Right, and that's what we're saying. But brands don't really see that value because in their minds they see numbers sexy, number about body rider, number about lingerie, right? That's what they want because the numbers and the stats look sexy. But for us, even this, they might say, but there's not a lot of people here, but these are a lot of long-lasting connections that if you're going from a marketing standpoint, this is LTV. This is a lifetime value because when we done, like, I'm building deeper roots in my network, but they don't see that because they want instant results, instant gratification. And if that's what you're running down, they're always going to be in this loop of trying to figure out how they're going to retain an audience because they're not looking at the lifetime value. They're looking need return. But that's the thing. That's what I was saying. Using lifetime value versus, your returning customer. Because here's the thing: in this very digital age, advertisers and companies are losing. I may not have this need right now, but when I do, you need to be top of mind. And if you're not, what do we do? When we want to go to the doctor, we want to go to some fitness school, like my son is about to go to school, a daycare, you calling up everybody to find out who is what. And if you're not Google, there's certain things you don't Google. You go and visit. There's just some things you don't Google. You want to know that. All right, my friend's daughter, son, somebody went there. That's how we operate.
You know, a lot of things too, because a lot of the technology is not designed for our culture. So that's it.
You just select on the plane, not on the camera, but
Yeah, you better get on this camera because you was racing me up about getting on camera. She would come around here. She's gonna hide after she.
No. I was gonna say, I went to Jamaica this time last year. I was doing it, so around the 22nd of July, 24th, and everything is mobile first, right? So a lot of applications, a lot of the resources up here are not mobile first. Now they're more focused on mobile first, but just people will have 2-3 phones before they touch a computer, before they touch an iPad or a tablet. And it's like a lot of the work opportunities, the production side opportunities, so the opportunity to create content and information is on desktop, maybe tablet. It's not really on mobile.
Yeah.
So, or like apps. So there's like that is also sets it back a little bit. So you're on a lot more consumer market out there. Like you're just taking it instead of like really creating like distribute.
But even then, the Caribbean itself is, like someone said, it's ages, and it means that if you haven't done your dues and you're older, then my fellows say, "Okay, go sit down and do your thing." It's very ages where it's not young people this and old people. There's old people saying you're too young, they're not ready for this yet. And like I talked about, the Caribbean and most of the other developing world, African stuff. I mean, yes, there are people who have mobile, but they're very mostly largely a mobile society. And so I recently shared the internet trends and some reports where if you look at the Caribbean, there's so many things that are barriers for entry, right? One, how do people in the Caribbean accept payments, right? There's no PayPal, there's no none of that. How do you do that? And then people doing some workarounds just to get their money. Trust me, they come over here, they set up their bank accounts, and they doing some work. So that's one. Two, if they do have a phone, they don't have a credit card or a debit card because guess what? Yeah, they're cash. They're mostly cash too. So you don't have that issue. And then three, like, yo, we need my credit. We're not gonna spend my credit on this. Like, if the content isn't consumable by YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, then they're like, they're not really go for it because that's kind of where their high penetration is. And then of course WhatsApp is through the roof in the Caribbean and Africa, which is why the people that live in WhatsApp the other day, the owners, because they're like, look at what's in my WhatsApp, they're supposed to want to pop up, something you're laughing. But like,
but that's what Facebook does. That's what
They definitely are.
Facebook is essentially a marketing
Yeah.
and advertising. Yeah, same thing, advertising. So those are some of the barriers where I remember I had a guest on the show, and we were talking about Grace, Mikelah, whoever they are. They don't need us because they know so we're gonna buy it anyway. They know we want the ketchup. They know we want to buy it. They know we like Mikelah over the hot chocolate. They know we want to buy it, so they take it for granted. And I feel like they shouldn't worry about us. They should worry about my kids. Because my kids are like,
They don't know about it.
what is this? Yeah, they don't. They're like, I mean, they know it. Like, no, but my son, he loves the guava jelly, and he'll eat this and he'll say what he wants. But if I don't feel like they're checking for me or marketing to me, then fine. Not because I'm a returning citizen, that doesn't mean that I don't want to have tourist experiences. But it's taking the lifetime value for granted, because the reality is nostalgia is the reason why we keep buying some of the products.
They're good too. They're good. I like the Grace ketchup.
But the most part,
guava jelly.
yes, but they're expensive. Expensive compared to what I could get at a 3-packet BJ's.
What is the nostalgia you said?
Yeah, but this is what did I tell them? Like, who's marketing understanding the nostalgic component? Which tracking nostalgic component? What? Which tracking?
Like, how can you track?
But this is what I'm saying. They need to connect with me, because the other bloggers that they're trying to reach don't know about the nostalgic part, because they don't live here to understand that. The only reason why there's such a, I'll say a perfect example. So when I moved here in 1993, I went back to Jamaica in 1995. My cousins were like, "Oh God, you're talking worse than when you was living here." Why? Because I'm holding on to that culture, and so before you know it, we're at in Jamaica. properly, you go to school, you cannot talk that way in class. Here, when I went to high school, well, I didn't see that, but kids in other class, like, yo, teacher, Miss Hamilton, you know, and so before you know it, it's like, you're like, wait a minute, like, I barely speak proper English until it's time to go to work, and then your coach, yeah, why do I need it? So then when you think of, you know, the products that you have to buy, where you have to go buy it, right? I remember I lived in the Midwest, right? One shop sold all the Jamaican products, right? And Lord help me, we're gonna drive over Cersei, go get like all the way over there. That's commitment to the culture because we miss home. We remember the day. We're looking through rose-colored lenses about the great times back home. So who are the people who can talk to my uncle and my mother and, you know, my friends and my cohorts in this age that like, yo, you remember? Like, up to this day, my husband and I sing like some old jingles, like the Grace Coxswood jingle and the Quentin is my number one jingle. And my kids like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, but they lose that opportunity, and as the generations, another perfect example, the Oliver plays, right? Right. But the whole experience is going to a play. How many of those are recorded, right? Because our kids not going to sit on in there, watch a play and watch the set change and information and come back. They don't want to do that, right? So the popularity, you know, the reason why Oliver was also living in perpetuality is because the JVC Oliver at large. And that was a perfect example of things that you need to kind of capture on, you know, video so it can continue to live. So now we live in a meme country. Well, you haven't been in my messages, but Mikelah will tell you, I'll drop an Oliver with the ears off at the airport any day, like, boom, drop it, like, it's cold. And I have, like, my ears, like, little baby. When Oliver was at the airport, like, you know? You know, but if the newer plays that they were doing were also recorded, you continue the longevity of culture, right? In that form, in theater form. Because Broadway, they record their performances. So why doesn't Jamaican theater record performances and redistribute it? Because Broadway knows that realistically not everybody can come to a Broadway show. But you want them to experience that, so when they do come to New York or they go to Chicago or go to LA, they're going to save up their money and try to go to a Broadway show. But they have to give them an easier, cheaper way to experience that before they can, you know, like, convince them to do it live. So, I mean,
the same thing with creating a magazine. A lot of people that discourage us from doing print. They're like, why are you doing print? It's so expensive. Oh my gosh, don't do it, just go digital. But we're like, you have to understand. Our region doesn't even have a cohesive media ecosystem whatsoever. We don't have a magazine there. We don't have a magazine here that's exclusively for us, that's across all countries. So it's like, why not create that cultural long-term value for everyone that you can, you know, buy and flip back to and say, oh my gosh, I remember this story that was written by such and such. Oh my gosh, I remember I was in this, you know. I feel like sometimes we think so much about digital first, local first, short-term first, before we think about long-term. And speaking of nostalgia, if our culture wasn't long-term, or if our value wasn't long-term, we wouldn't remember Oliver, we wouldn't remember Milo, we wouldn't remember anything. Alex, exactly. My grandmother used to drink that, like, you know, that's her daily tea. But we remember these things. I think sometimes what we often forget is that parts of our culture is value-based. So when in terms of marketing, you have to market the value, not just the culture itself. And I think a lot of U.S. brands have to start realizing that in order for them to market effectively and originally to the Caribbean.
I think the challenge also is we're lumped into African American demographic or Latino. So it's like, I don't know how much of this market share really exists. All right, great. Mikelah says somebody get me.
Okay.
And then the other aspect, and then the other aspect of that is, all right, what is, so after you separate the African American and the Latino aspect, and that's what also makes the culture kind of challenging, right? Because you have within that one region, you have Francophone, you have Spanish speaking, like you have like a mixture of us. And you know, for a culture that likes to break things down this way, we're kind of like, so it don't really work that way. Become like, and so, you know, just the demographics alone and identifying, okay, what segment of this American population is actually Caribbean. And then I feel like the only time we get some love is when, you know, not even Nicki, but let's say Nicki Minaj, Cardi B, all of these people, Rihanna, you know, they kind of do things there, but they still haven't figured out how to market to us. And they're looking for someone who is like in their box of marketing influencers to kind of say, okay, these are the people I need to talk to next.
Are they influencers?
No.
They get into people that know about the region or that want to know more about the region, but they have that number, and then they're like, oh, since you have that number, you can get to the demographic. They still don't know.
The one thing that I learned about so to your point, I have people telling me like, forget Caribbean audience, because they ain't checked this video. Expand your audience. Like, you ain't gonna make no money with the Caribbean.
That goes back to what you said about if someone else likes your content, then you get recognized.
The thing is, you know, you cannot put your name on it yet, but you will see. Money drives everything, and everything they want to market. Like if you can't make money from it, and that's right, as business, if you can't make money from it, then it's not a business, or if it's not something, right? But what happens when people are like, don't focus on the Caribbean audience, because they didn't understand. So I'm very clear that not everybody who has Caribbean parentage is my audience.
Yeah.
If you have a mother, father, or grandparent that's from the Caribbean, but you were not influenced by the culture in your upbringing, then you're not my audience. That's clear. Because then I'm going to talk about things that you have you can't relate to it. If you might have heard your dad or your mom or someone say, but if they weren't talking patois, you know, Creole or whatever to you, and if they didn't start telling you about when they used to go to school barefoot, you know, like, if none of those stories were ever part of your upbringing, then
why did they do that to us?
I don't know. They was like, we did have 1 shilling, and then she.
I don't have to do it now. Like, I don't get it.
Like,
you know, it was a completely different thing that I was used to. And then I was in summers there, but oftentimes they were still separate from the rest of the Caribbean. Even though we are, you know, Caribbean, you know, we're also, you know, we're also like kind of sets us apart, not just being, you know, Spanish speaking, but it's also the fact that, you know, we're also Americans. So we forget that. But oftentimes, like, people go like, oh, so you're first generation American? I'm like, I am not. I'm like third or fourth, because Puerto Rico didn't become a part of the Commonwealth until like 1927. So, you know, so we've always had this misconception about, you know, different parts of the Caribbean, especially like the U.S. Virgin Islands, and so forth. So it's kind of, you know, so you know, it's like when I lived down there and I traveled and I was working down there, it was you know, it was a great experience. It was eye-opening, and the one thing I noticed very quickly was that the countries, the states, the politics, for people who were trying to do something completely different, it was like shut them down every chance they got to be shut down. Like, no, can't support them. Whereas like here in the U.S., it's like, well, you know, I'm starting a company, and it's going to be a technical company. You know, it's like, you might get a little pushback from your family. That's one thing. You get pushback from your own government. That's another thing. So it's more like, well, why not? This is an opportunity. You know, why take advantage of this opportunity to actually grow your base? You know, it's like this is the even playing field now for anyone in the world, particularly the Caribbean. You know, this is how you can, you know, when you can actually afford a 4K camera and actually start a production company with under $6,000. That's one, you know, but if you it's about learning how to code and actually building applications and actually, helping the local restaurant to be part of a listing. To be, no, we don't want to do any of that. And oftentimes politicians are very much so not helping.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I noticed when I travel. There's literally over 30 countries. Not one of them are very open to change.
And I think that
People hate change.
they're used to the current system, right? So that they know what to expect.
They
how
know
much
it
to
works.
expect, they know it works. So
They
it's
know
like,
it works.
it's like doing a thing.
Yeah.
If it don't work, no. If it's not working, we'll fix it.
But how well is it?
But do you think Western influence is impacting this and that we're not wanting to change?
What it is, from what I notice is that nobody takes the exception of the rule. People hate the exception of the rule. Like in Barbados, they talk about Rihanna all day long. When she first broke out, they were just like, "What is she doing?" She's following the rules.
Remember what I said?
Yeah.
Wagoness. When you first start, I don't know, should I really, or it should blow up? Yes, it's mine. It's mine. If anybody send around, they need to show me an example.
What do you
Because
think that comes
saying it's
Order. In the Caribbean, in Barbados particularly, because there's a lot of my friends that have Asian friends who just like, they all know the same thing. It's like, if you're a singer and so on and so forth, there's a certain thing you have to do to get to the next thing you have to do to then get where they want you to be.
that's what we just said. If
But
you
if you break that role model, if you break that rule, if you actually change, oh my God, what are you doing? You're not supposed to do that. Why are you doing that? You're not. Get back in your place. What are you doing? You're like,
they need to pay
or
your dues. That's why I said your agents, they need to pay your dues. There's a proper way. It's this thing about I went through all of this to reach here, so you can't skip those steps to reach here.
To me, that's maybe the older generation.
The older generation.
But with the youth, they're more flexible and they go into seeing different things because they'll actually support more people that coming up and trying different things.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. And I think you see how we're here right now supporting, even though we are open and the younger generations are open to it, we still don't want to feel like we're disrespecting the older ones by taking that leap of faith. So it's like some people don't have to just take the L and say, all right, my family's just gonna hate me for a while I figure this out so that they see it's right, and then I could show. Then the other people could use me as their example to show their families like, look, this person did chance, they did fine. Now, can I go now? Like, you see, it works.
She needs both her eyes.
No, but it's also what we talk about where we run this joke all the time, right? It's like if you're not lawyer, doctor, engineer, teacher, Caribbean parents, and it's because it's a predictability. They know that this can lead to success, even though we know that. Not because you go to school and get these degrees, it means success. Or you go get a job. But to them, yeah, man, but that's our engineer. Yeah, man, engineer, because in your head. And that's the comfort that they're looking for because they remember, and they're still our parents. I kind of give to a certain degree some leeway because there are parents still and they still want the best. So enough in them head. You have a job, want your pension, want all these things. That's why I did that episode when I was pregnant. Because the last couple times I was pregnant, nobody can advise me as to what to do when I go on maternity leave or what will happen at work. And when I come back, or I'm going to fix it at work, or people will get promotion. And I mean, these are things that people talk about. But I have to remember when my mom and dad, my youngest brother, when my mom had it, she never went back to work. And so, like, how can they help us navigate these modern work situations? They really can. Like, when I get there and just hold on your head and do your work, things don't work for me either. Because trust me, we hold on with it too much. Because Caribbean people, we have two things. We either go be like one of the character major hype cuss off everybody straight to the game, the angry person, or you're going to be the person who sit there and then one day somebody goes to something and then you start doing the major hype character and cuss them off. And we don't learn about a gray area because we were so cultured to kind of hold your head down.
Yeah.
Don't get in trouble, do your work. And that affects us in a lot of things at work. And I keep saying, yo, you can't bring soccer rules to a American football game because them are kick ball and them are run with ball. And it's two different things.
We are a disadvantage.
Exactly, because no matter what happened, you know, and I say this a lot because people don't think about it. The things that our parents teach us, they become so embedded into us that it's on autopilot, right? So how many of them in here, like, go shut up, sit down, you know, be seen, but not heard. You know, like all of these things kind of ingrained, so you never but like some of us are good, not everybody, but so many of us heard those things. Whether if it's not that, it was something else. When you're so tired, when you kill yourself, sit down, relax yourself, and so these things subconsciously sits into our psyche, and then this is how we carry ourselves. Like, no, right now I'm good because they're on the people that are over there. Hey, Kerry-Ann.
Did you guys see? I don't know if it's like a sidetrack, but you brought up how we talk earlier. Like, you know how you have that. And you have so there's music coming out. This guy who's like, he's a call center representative.
Oh, I've seen it.
Oh, you seen it?
I saw the preview. The guy from okay.
Yes.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, I'm calling because you're having an issue with Bell. I want to make sure I got this. And he's like, how would that? And they're like, yeah, that was good. And all of a sudden, he started getting promoted.
Yeah. That happened to me.
It's all switching, and then they had a couple more videos from like BuzzFeed, and then Me Too. They had videos about it because it's a real thing, and it's like I've gotten to a point where I'm consciously telling myself, you cannot post or you're not allowed to post anymore, because if you think about it, when we walk into a space, right, you're not just, oh, I'm a person walking into a space. You're a black woman from this island with there's so many things, and that's taking us. Now, 50% of your brain is working on being like trying to be not, you know, to get the accent, but not to sound dirty, and not to do all these extra things that you could kind of like get your point across and just be there in that space. And it's just like, I'm gonna give you an example real quick. For example, today, right? I'm about to write a blog post because over the last like couple of weeks, I've noticed that when I show up, the more I show up as myself, the more people get like suspicious, right? So I'm in the store, if I have on my like jacket and my book, like I always have a book bag with me, I'm always wearing because I'm like, what I know. It's just like I want to write a post that says, F you, I have money. So it's like, now you're noticing it more. It's like, what are you talking about? Yes, I'm on the phone. I'm calling customers. Yes, and I'm stopped right in the store, like looking at when I'm 25 minutes. Because I'm putting something on social media, but people, they don't recognize that somebody else that they have a different skin tone and will do those same things that we do. But it's like, okay, that's normal, but oh, that's suspicious. And it's just the more you're playing a daily game of, is that racist or is it that? You just never know.
I think what happens is people put you in, like, for example, you were saying, within the past 2 months, like last time we saw each other, we were at a thing where I was actually putting together my company. I'm like, I want to do this, I want to do this, I have a website up, I have this, I have that. The only thing I had was like the content and the name, and I didn't even have the EIN number. And so, oh, and by the way, anybody who ever wants to start a business, when you're doing it with people, those companies that actually are online that want to charge you $100-something or $70, listen, the IRS doesn't charge you a damn thing to get an EIN number. You just got to go to the IRS website and sign up for your EIN. You do it for free. It's free. You don't charge. No one should be charging you for that. And the articles of incorporation, you have to do that through the state of the government and then the state of New York, for example. It's charging you no more than like $200, $300, depending on which one you need. But that's not even necessary until like the end of the year when you get your taxes and get it back.
Even if you do taxes.
Right, so.
You should do your taxes.
You should always do your taxes.
You should.
When you're starting your business, you should always do, not only should you always do your taxes, you should bother the IRS and actually make sure that you're actually doing things correctly.
Yeah.
Because people oftentimes do not know. People know how to mess up a lot quicker than you learn to do when it comes to, especially if it's your first time doing it. This is my first time, starting my business that's under me, that I'm going to be in charge of, that I'm going to be
LLC or
I did a corporation.
okay, I was about to say, do not with those LLC.
No, I don't do it. I think there's no purpose in doing
Because
an
they
LLC.
are going to run you ragged.
Yes.
Sorry, this is
New
like
York State, New York State, they will run you back.
So-
Other states are different.
honey, we gonna get you out of that sole proprietorship.
Yeah, we're
You
gonna
need to get
No, I mean-
liability. So
Yeah.
here's the thing. So an LLC in New York, unlike any other state, is like the most expensive in business format to use, because years ago, I don't know if I don't know which newspaper and all that money. But what happens is when you file an LLC, it's cheaper in terms of the fees. But once you get the authorization, you have to do a publication requirement that requires you to advertise in 2 separate newspapers over a period of time that you started this LLC. Now, minimum, and you don't get to pick the newspaper.
No, they pick it for you.
The county clerk picks the newspaper. How much money do you have to run ad in a New York Times? I don't have it. So what I did was I formed a corporation, an S Corp. An S Corp is small business corporation, and you just have to. It just takes a couple extra steps, but that's what I did because I ain't messing with this LLC.
So what are the benefits of that? I'm sorry.
Same. It's almost the same thing. Flow through taxation if you do the S Corp versus the LLC. It's just that you have to do some extra steps. So when you do the EIN, you have to get a separate request to qualify as an S Corp. And then when you do that, you have to make sure the state realize that you're an S Corp, so they don't double charge you for tax, because a corporation is taxed twice. The corporation itself is taxed, and the officers are the people who are in the corporation are taxed. Because you are S Corp, one tax. And you just disclaimer, please see a professional when it comes to this, but that's what you do. Now, and then you have to be on your tax professional to become a tax person. Mistakenly filed it as an
C Corp?
no, not a C Corp. When I was doing my taxes, the form, the C form or whatever on your personal tax, as opposed to the 1120S, which is the separate form. So what happens is the IRS looks at that like, oh, you haven't filed your taxes in a year, but like, yes, I did. The accountant made a mistake. Oh, you owe us money. Yeah. That is just how crazy it is. You have to make sure. And then when you have a business, let's say you have a business and then you lost your job, I don't know how you're going to get unemployment with that. Because unemployment was like every time you work on your blog or your magazine or your business, you are making money. You cannot use that time to say that you can collect money. You cannot.
They want you to get up unemployment all the time by actually starting your own business. Can you start your own business?
That's how they can get you up unemployment. So you can start your own business.
Yeah.
So selling T-shirts on the blog, oh, you're making money every time you do a blog post, you tweet or something. That's working for your business. You can only file unemployment. Yeah.
Working on your own website. Like for me, for like the past 2 months, like I had to actually switch from a personal cell phone, because my personal cell phone was they were charging like 160, and I had to incorporate. Apparently, they only charge you like $100 for 3 months.
What do you plan this?
So we'll talk, because I'm not promoting anyone unless they pay me.
All right, we on the live stream.
Yeah, so I'm not promoting companies until they actually
Need some money.
Oh my God, we talked about what?
Blogging.
Blogging,
Yeah.
business formation,
This is for me.
apps.
But here's the other thing too, when you actually start your business, oftentimes for certain companies, when you're actually applying for certain things, like for example, when you're going for, like for example, cell phones. Like I switched from one company to another. Sometimes they actually have a push for it. Other companies, they actually stick by the book. So the reason I know that, because I used to work for a cell phone company, and you have to be 2 years in business for you to actually apply for cell phone. You're going to have to report it on deposit. Yeah. Each line that you want. I'm not going to say what company that is because you're not paying me. So anyways, the course program is that you want to actually build your business credit, which is separate from your personal credit. You still also have to wait 2 years. And you know what happens is that once you start doing that, then all of a sudden, if you want to get a loan for $20,000 because you want to actually go into a WeWork, you want to hire 3 people who actually want to develop something, you have to be in business for at least 2 years. So I always tell people, anyone who's actually going to business school, when you're looking to become an entrepreneur, start your business right then and there. The second you actually sign up, because it doesn't cost you anything to get the EIN number, it might cost you a couple of bucks to file, and then you got to file separately. You get the escrow situated. But once you do that, everything should be good enough for us. And then you got to get we're on move forward to get what you need to get, for your business. But for me, like I actually started my business 2 months ago because I saw myself in a place where I was just like, all right, I'm always working, small gigs, and I'm always working as a contract. And people always want me for this, and they don't want me long term. And even though I was always looking for a long term, role, I just wasn't there. Now my educational background should suggest something really different. I have an MBA, and I also just finished a Master's in Science and Plastic from NYU. So I have 2 masters. I also have certifications in digital media marketing from NYU, as well as leadership and management from NYU, as well as many other certifications. So it isn't like I don't know what I don't know. There's oftentimes people are like, well, you've done so many things. Well, when you produce something, you're doing it as a project manager. That's what that means. But oftentimes, for you to get your story out there, you have to actually then always sit there and publicize yourself. And that's oftentimes how you get your name, you build your brand, you actually do what you need to do, but you always stay in accordance of making sure that you actually protect your brand, protect your personal brand, not just your company brand, but you, because you are, it's like those people that are actually going online, because they were calling the police on a little black girl who was selling across the street from their home. Exactly. See, she lost everything. Right, but not everything. But the thing is, it's like you don't want to end up. She didn't protect her personal brand. She's living across the street from a stadium. What kind of noise are you complaining about? You're living across the street from a stadium, or working across the street from a stadium. If you're working across the street from a stadium, expect noise. Yeah. You shouldn't be complaining about a little girl selling water. Like within the stadium, right? Next, living it. It doesn't make any sense.
Real quick sidebar that really bothered me.
No, that was you trying to quote me.
My mother's always talking
People
about
calling the police on you for barbecuing. That should bother me too. Because calling the police on you when you're sleeping in your dormitory.
Or in the college.
And the college that you go to, and
when you're trying to pee in Starbucks.
Or when you're trying to go to use the bathroom at Starbucks. Because who orders? I go to Starbucks. I don't order anything at Starbucks. Anytime I go into Starbucks, like the last time I ordered something was 3 years ago, and it was a hot cocoa. It was crap. I don't drink coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker. Latino's looking at me like I'm a unicorn because I don't drink coffee.
I don't drink coffee either.
Yeah, exactly. I don't drink coffee. There's certain things that I don't really. But there's certain things I just don't do. You drink tea.
No, all right. No,
you're Caribbean. I drink half of that. Lemonade with tea. Yes.
I got better. You drink ginger ale.
I drink ginger
That's
ale.
the
I drink ginger ale. I drink Coca-Cola.
We're gonna get in a minute, but what I was gonna say is the woman that called the cops on the little girl. Do you guys know what her business is?
No. She's a cannabis owner.
She says cannabis oil with. She's a drug dealer. That's it. She's a drug dealer. That's what she does.
And when her distributor started saying, "We're not messing with you," I mean, she's acting like I didn't do anything wrong. I was just simply stating that she was too. I'm like, wait a minute. First off, you living across the street from a stadium. You complaining about the noise? For real? For real. You crying on live TV because a little black girl was too loud, but you didn't know that she was a black girl until you got to her. For real? You were in a stadium. A stadium. Like, come on now. Like, don't try to BS. Like, if you have an issue with somebody because you feel some sort of way, she's selling water. She's selling cannabis. She's selling water. Let her sell the camera.
Okay. All right, guys, say hi. We have 3 people on the live stream with us. Say hi. We're going to start the official Let me come in. We're gonna start the official Fireside chat now with Kerry-Ann and Mikelah. Okay, so yeah, come over.
Me was coming. Before the end, I should direct me not to carrot top. My gosh.
All right, so just of course, I'm always the boss. So just hit it off whenever you're ready, Mikelah.
Hey guys, so I know you guys have been here. I'm late, by the way. And it's not because I'm Caribbean that I'm late. I had valid issues and mom issues and mommy, situations. But thank you, Georgie, for having Kerry and myself kind of talking about the digital voice. I think, we're coming into a time where digital voice is kind of becoming more important over the time, especially because people don't have as much time to kind of watch videos, read through everything that they have filtered. So they kind of want like a curated experience. And then not only that, we'll kind of touch upon all the different voices in terms of why it's necessary. So for people who can't see and they want to still interact, audio is a big player, and they're ordering stuff online. They're listening to things. So it's almost like being inclusive of demographics that aren't traditionally thought of, but also using technology in terms of Alexa and Siri, and like just vocally talking out these things, and how us as Caribbeans are kind of using some of that as part of our platforms, and how we can kind of take it a step further by kind of being more inclusive. So Kerry and I have a really great working relationship. We both have our separate platforms, and we've kind of been collaborating over the last few years that we've known each other professionally. She has Carry-On Friends. I'm probably doing her intro for her, but I'll probably do it better than she did, because she don't like brag about that. So she has a podcast called Carry-On Friends. It's a podcast and a platform that talks to Caribbeans in the entrepreneur and career space. So I think it's unique because there are a lot of issues that kind of we experience and that we go through uniquely to being immigrants or first generation, second generation when it comes to entrepreneurship and career. And she kind of touches on those in her interviews, and especially in her one-on-one when she shares her experiences. So she's kind of been at the forefront of the whole podcast movement. She's actually spoken at an event called Podcast Movement in the last year. So she doesn't like to brag, but she knows a lot of things. And I think she's kind of at the pulse of like what's happening. So I think it's important to at least have the conversation, even if you're not ready to go this route, just to kind of keep it in the back of your mind that it's there. So, but you want to say no, Kerry?
I don't know. She said it, and I really think that this is an opportunity for us to really start looking at ourselves and becoming, at this point, we're not even early adopters. Maybe you guys are early adopters in the Caribbean segment, Caribbean market segment, but we're lagging on certain things, and we kind of need to catch up, right? So we were talking about, advertisers, companies aren't really checking for us, but are we creating the content for them to check for us? That's also that other thing that's happening. And then it's almost like the wild, wild west, a new frontier. We kind of have to figure out, blaze the trail, because it might seem like our counterparts in the mainstream Black American culture have figured it out. They haven't either. Brands are still trying to figure out how to work with them. And so we can't look at a template, we kind of have to create a template, and that's kind of what this whole conversation is, because I can't do it by myself. I'm just this one little light over here, and I just really feel like there's an opportunity for us to kind of get into this space. So many opportunities that some of I have to talk about, and I feel overwhelmed because I want to do it all, and I can't do it all. So
I think you kind of touched upon the idea of the opportunities, but I think sharing some of those opportunities, I know you feel like you've talked through it, and I think part of it is because you're in this space and you've been able to kind of know what's going on. But for someone who's new to the space, what would you suggest in terms of what are the opportunities out there for either entrepreneurs or people in the career space, or people who want to kind of just even get into the space of podcasting?
And okay, so the first thing is podcasting is like, it's like the new black. It's like everybody want to do it. Podcasting is like the new blogging. Everybody wants to do it, but podcasting is hard. Podcasting done right is hard. It takes a lot of work. So some people will have 2-hour podcasts, and no, they need some because the editing time alone is like ridiculous. And we don't have time to listen to nobody for 2 hours. Like that's, unless it's an internet radio show where it's just like it's music in between breaking that conversation. I'm not trying to hear somebody talk for 2 hours. Like, no way, you know? So podcasting done right is not easy. It is not, if you're doing it for instant gratification or thinking that you're going to make money, walk the next week. It is not going to happen. Absolutely. You have to figure out the reason why you want to create a podcast and you want to actually be happy. So I know some people who pay people to do editing for their podcasts, right? And that's something you could totally do. Me, I'm still kind of hands-on. I want to control like the person in the studio trying to control the work. So in terms of, so you have podcasts and you could create content, you could be production, you could, you know, but then last year when I went to podcast movement, my eyes opened up. I felt like a kid in Dylan's candy store. And that's when I realized that there was a huge exhibit hall of people creating apps specifically for podcasters, whatever that is, whether it's, and then the argument could be, well, those apps could be rendered irrelevant because, you know, you have Alexa and all these things, but how many people can afford Alexa right now and all of it? Not a lot. So in the meantime, how are you delivering it to the audience that actually needs to connect to it? So you have people building apps. The biggest thing right now in podcasting for an app developer is how am I going to get all of you to be on my show at one time? You know, we use Skype, it wigs out when it's ready. You have some people use Zoom. I know Georgie has used, people use Zoom. That is kind of where innovation is in this space. Where is a platform that I can have a panel discussion via podcast and record it, and something that's stable, it gives you good quality. Those are, and then it doesn't own my content, because I remember one platform, it kept your content for hosting. I'm like, no, I want to keep it on my computer. I want to edit it and do what I want with it. So like those are opportunities. Everyone does these videos. I'm sure you've seen it with the audio lines go across them. I don't like them, but you know, it's there. You know, voice recognition is like this huge thing. But when I'm on my podcast, you know, the talk patwa, you know, and when I use some of these things, it's crazy how they're interpreting things. So transcription is huge for podcasting. What kind of voice recognition can I use? So I end up paying someone on Fiverr who's in Jamaica who can transcribe my podcast, because they're the only ones that can understand what I'm saying, and I don't have to read it twice just to get the transcription. So like those are things that are there for innovation, but you kind of also have to be in the space to know what to innovate and what the pain points are of the content creators to know what to create. And then we have this whole voice element like Mikelah talked about. Also at Podcast Movement, there's this huge segment of the population, hearing impaired or vision impaired actually, who need to have a podcast, and you have to make sure that, or a website that is optimized for people who are vision impaired or stuff like that. And it's just like, why didn't I think of it? Because it's not in my immediate, you know, space. I don't have to deal with someone who's visually impaired. But then you start thinking, so like conferences out of the norm are really great to see what opportunities are there for people who could benefit from your content, but they might have some limitation. And what are those limitations? And how can I reduce some of those limitations?
So in terms of opportunity, I kind of want to recap. It's transcribing, creating apps that content creators can use to kind of make podcasting a little bit easier. There are some in the space, but there are still opportunities. Dedicating an audience to the visually impaired, and then taking advantage of voice recognition. So those are some of, I think, the opportunities that we don't, even when we said voice, like I'm sure, what did you guys think when we said digital voice? Like what came to mind? Like, what did you come here expecting to kind of talk about outside of Or you just had no, you're like, I need to know what this is. It's kind of just curiosity.
First, I didn't have much expectation.
Yeah.
Even with the older one, his
Yeah.
podcasting. Even though I was just podcasting when the iPod came out. But I never really listened.
Yeah.
It's like now as I'm getting older, I'm like, okay, podcasts. They're listening. Radio shows, on your phone, on your device. So just really, it's
Also more diversity now with podcasts. So it makes sense that as we get older, we're more interested in listening to what's happening. So I think that there's thinking more about podcasts because there's all this diversity that's happening.
Yeah. Well, I think digital has a kind of leveled the playing field, right? So we can now create, news and media because it's so accessible. And you can also create something that you would be interested in hearing. I think that kind of is what kind of gives us our start in that sense.
So my question is, you said it's not easy to start a podcast, but how expensive is it?
Do you want a good podcast? Do you want a good podcast? Because, all right, so there's an exception to everything, right? Because Mikelah, no, within my first year of my podcast, I lived in a particular large electronics store on 34th Street. I lived in it.
Somebody had to stop here with.
I've had to live in there too, so I understand.
They not paid them. So I
Maybe they'll look at it and be like, maybe we should be targeting these people.
So I have my own little mixer. I have like multiple mics as backup because when my mic was clicking. So I have like 3 mics. I have like a mic stand. I have like mic adapters. I use my MacBook. I need to get a new MacBook because I've run my MacBook ragged. I have external drives. I have pop filters. I have every single thing, like a mini audio studio because I am like all about the sound quality. Some people don't go through all of that. They plug it in because technically all you need is GarageBand, plug your headphones in and record it. But as Mikelah figures out, it doesn't work that way. I need to be able to split my recording when I do an interview in 2 tracks because if my guests, their audio is bad or something is happening, I need to be able to eliminate the silence or issues on their line. And so then I can produce it. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. It gets away from you. And I'm still trying to get more audio editing skills to kind of do some magic. But sometimes I leave it because I want the audience to know it doesn't always go perfect. Sometimes these clicking and popping and distortion happens and I can't do anything about it.
You said GarageBand, but you didn't also talk
I don't
about.
use GarageBand.
Oh, okay, exactly.
I don't use it. I want to
So wait,
But-
I guess my question is, let's say for example, someone in another country, let's say someone in the Caribbean, they want to start a podcast. They want to get from good to great. What can they start off with if they wanted to go from good to great? Like what's the price?
What level am I?
$100 bucks? Is it $100 bucks? $20 bucks?
So I'll tell you, I literally went through this whole process recently. Only because I literally dragged my feet in starting a podcast because I was just like, oh, it's too much work. It's something else. So I have like a platform. I have a blog. And I'm just like, I know I need to talk to people, but I don't like transcribing. I don't like recording. I like having the interview, but I don't like transcribing it so that I have to, so I have more of a journalist background. So traditionally you would record the interview, transcribe it, write around it, take out quotes. So that's my approach when I'm doing an interview. And it's just like in my mind frame, if I can't do that, then I don't want to do it. But I knew that I needed to do, and initially I wanted to do more video. But video is even more time consuming and needs more resource. So Kerry was like, just start a podcast. And I was just like, all right, well, you're gonna have to help me with this podcast because I'm not really sure where to start. And quite literally, it was something, I knew that it needed to be an extension. It wasn't going to be my sole platform. So a lot of podcasters are like, I just do podcasting. I knew that it would be like a wheelhouse of what I wanted to create. For me, it's just an additional content avenue. So I treat social media very different. I treat the site very different. The email newsletter, paid, advertisements that's separate. It's just another way for me to get content out there. And it's in the same wheelhouse, but it's just a different format. So we went through, it was supposed to be an 8-week process, but because I kind of dragged my feet on it, it took maybe about 12 weeks. So I had to push back the start date. And she gave me like a vigorous schedule of what it entails. She gave me like checklists of what to do every week and how I needed to. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm definitely going to quit in week 4 because it's easy to record the podcast. It's, you know, I didn't want to learn editing skills. I didn't want to try and transcribe. So I was like, you know what? Let's test it. I'll do 10 episodes, see how it goes. I'm in my 4th episode, and I like it. I do. It kind of gave, you know, some fresh energy to the site itself. And, you know, adding Joanna has listened to it a few times, and
So to the first thing.
But I'm gonna get to the cost.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to the cost. So for me, I wanted to test it in a way that it wasn't costing me a whole lot of money because I already have a budget for everything that so I have web hosting, I have, you know, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, you know, I have the time and the resources. So I haven't reached my 1,000, you know, but I'm broaching that on the email newsletter list. So I have to keep that in mind. And then I pay for Dropbox and I pay for this. So I was just like, I need to start this and I want to record it on my phone because if I'm doing like entertainment or celebrities, it has to be on the fly and it's easier for me to get to them than it is for them to get to me. So I need to be able to record on my phone. I just want to drop it somewhere. You can edit it and all of that stuff. So I literally, so I pay for the hosting. The hosting is $20 a month. I bought the microphone, which was maybe
But you pay for the hosting from where? For your website?
For the podcast.
The
So you have
podcast
the
hosting
podcast
cannot
hosting
be
is
on your website. It's
Right.
absolutely
You use SoundCloud.
SoundCloud, you have to pay for it.
$15.
listen, SoundCloud.
But it doesn't feed to the other. See, this is what I've learned. It doesn't feed to the other platform.
Doesn't. No.
You can embed it. Just take the U.
No, but you won't get the stats.
Here's the thing.
And it won't have the.
So let me get to your question. So she had to do the phone, and we had to find the best app to record the best quality, and that is dependent on your phone. Do you have an iPhone or do you have an Android? Those are things to consider. So first thing was recording. How are they delivering that format? Because the format she gives me, I can't really do the fun things that it's like
a MP4.
MP4 fun.
But it's not split.
I can't split.
But I didn't understand why the split was
exactly
why it was important.
Yeah, mono was for 1,
Right.
stereo was for 2.
exactly.
Right,
So,
but I'm not coming from that background.
right.
So I don't know. I just want to record it and be done with it. And I don't even want to know. I just want it to be nice but I know the difference. So even when we recorded our podcast together and I heard the sound quality, I was like, I'm not happy with this. And she's like, you know, I wasn't really happy with it either. Let's re-record it. Then you have to schedule time to re-record it and get the sound to sound a little bit better. But that also takes trial and error. So I didn't learn all of these things until I was actually in it. And quite literally, I'm still in that testing phase to see if, like, I tested an advertisement. Does it, you know, how did they like it? Do they, you know, would they come back? That sort of thing. So I'm literally still in that process. It's not costing me too much. So I would say right now it's literally, the startup cost is maybe about $50, and the maintenance of just the website hosting is $20. And then I'm factoring in promotion on social that'll go live this week to test it for about 2 to 3 days. So I'm factoring maybe 10 to 15 per advertisement.
And so the other cost that you can't really factor is the time cost, right? So how much is our time per hour? That's something that you have to consider. Do you have the time? You know, she didn't do the editing, I did. And it's much easier for me to do the editing because it's just like, okay, I know what I'm listening to, you know, clean it up, do some post, you know, compressor settings, all that, and just kind of finish it and do all of that. Some people pay someone to do that. And if you were like, I don't want to do the editing, I'll pay someone. You're looking at least at $500, $600 for maybe 4 episodes a month.
And I'm looking at the transcriber she uses to transcribe my interviews, and I think she charges like maybe $15
per. So it can add up.
But to me, that's valuable because it's long tail, so I can get the SEO. So if I can get someone to transcribe, format it real nice. I can also get the tweetable, you know, I can also pull out, you know, key quotes from text to actually promote long term. And so my goal is to have more evergreen interviews. So even though I'm interviewing a few celebrities, they're not talking about what they're doing right now. I want them to converse with me about what they do in their everyday life. And we'll talk about a little bit of what they're doing now, but I think it's important to kind of, if someone wanted to go back and figure out who this person was, this interview would be a good, and that's a lot of what we're not doing. The transcripts aren't there. The videos are there in terms of the interviews. And then I also find, depending on who you talk to, they really don't want to talk about anything. Yeah. So it's really, you know, I mean, you and I have great conversation because we're everyday people, but you know, people who talk for a living, they don't want to talk. So it really takes some sort of hand holding, pulling, and asking the right questions and making sure that they're actually engaging, because I know somebody's like, this interview was boring. This was hard. This was a waste of my 15 minutes. Like, I need 15 minutes back. So if I feel that way, then somebody else is going to feel that way too. So I want to make sure that the value that you get out of it. So I'm looking to invest more because I've seen positive, you know, feedback. But I think it's been a huge help to just understand the different parts of it and how it can play a bigger role in my wheelhouse.
So before I answer your question, to understand how the podcasting worked, Apple started it because they had this whole, you know, they had their iPod they came out with a couple years ago, and so people could start recording it. So inherently in the name podcasting is de facto an Apple product, right? And so if you really want your podcast to have any traction, it has to be in Apple, period. Recently, Google has been trying to push this whole Google podcast. And it could be a game changer because, you know, Google will then prioritize podcasts in Google Play or whatever it is, you know, Play Me, Kerry-Ann, Friends, the Caribbean American podcast. But Google is still new, but they have this whole strategy about how they're going to, you know, promote or prioritize podcast content. So when you Google Kerry-Ann Friends, like, this whole Google Play section will come up with listing my episodes of the show. Whereas now you Google it, you have links to all these other sites. Google Play or Google Podcast is trying to make it so embedded in the infrastructure that when you Google my show, you can actually play an episode within the search results itself.
Is it like how they have like the YouTube, and when you like look up like a song or an album, you can like just play it
right, that's kind of where they're trying to go with podcasts, but they're not there yet because it's for Android users. Because the reality is only 30% of the audience or America or people are familiar with podcasts. There's another 70% of people who are like, what the hell is this? I don't really care. So, you know, Android users are also much more larger than Apple users. So in a way, it's technically a big thing, but the way we present that content still has to be diversified. And then you have Spotify. Spotify is coming in with a vengeance on whatever it's trying to do. So depending on your hosting platform, you can get your podcast pushed to iHeartRadio, which you don't really get stats on. Maybe it feeds into your hosting. For Spotify, you definitely get stats for, and then you have Stitcher Radio. And those are good because as people switch between, and the thing that I like about how Spotify does it, when people switch between playing their music, they can search for the show. Whereas on Apple, you know, you have to literally get out of the app, the podcast app, and go into the music app. Whereas in Spotify, I search for my show, you search for the show, you search for podcasts, it shows up right there. And I just got Tidal because, you know, and I saw that they have this whole segment on podcast as well. So also the seamless or the integration of it. So let's say Style and Vibes, right? Somebody types Vibes into Spotify, maybe her show pops up in it. On Apple, you have two separate apps.
Not yet, I'm waiting for approval.
They're waiting for approval. And that's to show you, Spotify has gotten so many requests for shows to be added to their platform. They initially closed off not accepting any more podcasts until they've revamped their system for accepting new podcasts. Because again, it's good that it's in Apple, but it's the seamless experience of using that. Okay, I'm listening to my music. I was listening to my 90s dance. Okay, let me switch and listen to this podcast. It's so much easier. So that's the reason why people aren't really doing SoundCloud, because I don't know what else is funky happening with SoundCloud, and it doesn't really feed. People don't listen to it. People mostly listen to SoundCloud for like mixtapes and all of that. It's not the go-to. It's good to be there, and quite frankly, for the low value of what SoundCloud provides, I'm not going to pay for that to push my podcast. And so SoundCloud in and of itself, you have to look at the Spotify model of how my experience is seamless, where I can go listen to Bojubanta and Spragabens in 1 minute and then search for a podcast in another minute. Whereas in the Apple, again, I'm jumping from one app to the other. So that's kind of an approach.
Are there any platforms that allow you to host and own your own podcast as a person? Going through Spotify, going through
All right, so you own your content, right? Yeah, so we're gonna get this. You own your content, and you're using a provider to host that content, right? So when you go to Kerry-Ann Friends, what you're seeing there is I pay the same way you pay someone to host your website. They're hosting my audio file, and I embed the link to that audio file. So if you think of APIs, right? It's literally they're hosting it. They give me a link, you play, and it just pings that, right? Yes, you can do it, but then what's the point? Because one, discoverability is going to be super low, and then like you have to go where your audience listens and plays, and so your discoverability is low if you only have it on your website.
But I would say that even if you put it on their sites, they don't own it.
No, they don't own it. That's why I said they don't own it. Owning feeds is a whole other thing that is good. This is getting real deep into it, but owning your RSS feed for your podcast is a whole different story that I'm discovering.
Big companies do that.
Yes, so like NPR, they own their podcast feed, and that is. So I explained this to
Can you
me.
explain that a little bit more?
We talk about networks,
What in terms of what?
podcast networks, like.
Who's all right? So what was your question about?
No, I'm just saying explain the owning the RSS feed.
Okay. So when you go to Libsyn, they give you a feed that is carryonfriends.libsyn.com, right? In essence, you don't own that feed. So if I should switch from one provider to another, like Audio Boom, my stats reset. I can't carry the stats that I have in Libsyn to Audio Boom. So if you own your RSS feed for your podcast, it doesn't matter where you go. I am going to give Audio Boom this feed to point to, and all my stats will always. So there will never be a dip. And I experienced this because I went with a new podcast provider last year after Podcast Movement. And I didn't really like it because I'm an analytics person. I want to see every number. I want to see downloads, this and that. And it didn't give me everything that I wanted. So I switched back to the carrier, the provider that I have. So what I had to do was I have a separate spreadsheet for everything. And I had to download the stats from the company that I was with for the little 3 months. And then, match it, like kind of do my spreadsheet to kind of see what my real numbers were, because there was a gap. So when I went back to my old provider, it was just like, it was this all the way up, then it went flat line, and then I'm starting back up again. So that is the value of owning your own feed. So you can take your podcast wherever you go and your stats with.
So maybe that might be a new avenue for
innovation, because someone provides a service, which is like a white label service, where you can purchase your feed. You purchase your feed, and then they host your feed, and then everything kind of streamlined through the feed. So again, opportunities for innovation, because you need to own your feed. And that's why a lot of people don't switch podcast providers, because the question is always like, if I switch to so-and-so company, will I get my stats? No, I remember what we said. Stats are like sexy, they're in Bachelorette, Boom Boom Shop, and lingerie. And oh my God, my stats change. Oh my God. Everybody goes crazy because you lose momentum.
What do you think about Anchor?
Well, you didn't see the terms on Anchor. Anchor owns your content. No,
I ain't read that.
exactly. Like, no, like I want to own my stuff. Like they
Spreadsheet. Who owns the content?
yeah, Anchor, and actually there was a conversation I'll show you on LinkedIn, like the language in their terms was like, they own it, they could use it and do anything with it. I was just like, no. You were asking about podcast networks?
Right, like what would it cost if, let's say, somebody wanted to start a podcast network? Normally, a podcast network. Like I know. Kevin Smith is my mom, that I know that started a thing called Smodcast years, like over a decade ago. He's been like, he was like one of the first pioneer podcasters who's still pushing out content on multiple channels.
So the challenge with podcast networks are they don't really work for people of color, right? And whenever you think of network, it's like this blogging term, like, oh, if I join this network, you're going to make me money. And podcast networks, unless you are part of like the big ones, like Wondery or Gimlet or these big ones, no, you're not going to make money, maybe, but not really. So that's the reason why Breadfruit Media is a production company and not a podcast network company. Like you can either have that 8-week period where I help you get your show launched, or you will rock with me for the end of the whole life, and we will produce and co-create content. I'm not going to promise you sponsors because it's hard. Sponsors still haven't figured out ROI because they're business people. What is the ROI if I do this? They're not looking at the LTV, the long-term value or the lifetime value of being part of this, right? And then there's this thing in podcasts called dynamic ad insertion where they could drop things in and take it out. I'm not offering that because your ad would be baked into my show for the lifetime of the show. And I know I met this man last year at Podcasting the Best. He has it's called Horse Radio Network. He has about 18 shows on his own podcast network that talk about different things about horses. And Mikelah and I laugh because I'm like, I didn't even know, but it's real stuff. He makes money. He doesn't do the ad insertion because he has a small.
Saying like, why don't you look for a podcast? Can't make no money.
He has a dedicated, niche-focused audience about horses. Yeah, people who are show horses, all these types of things. Go ahead.
But now I was going to say that's somewhat similar to what the network should be of just people who have that same.
Yeah, but can you pay them?
Well, that's what I'm working on.
Exactly. You paying talent, getting ads. How do you let your sponsors see the value of advertising in your show?
I think that's where platforms like Facebook, platforms where you can monetize, your content.
But you don't own the content when it's on Facebook.
But sometimes you don't want to own it.
No, you always want to own it.
Well, yeah, but but it's some stuff you can throw away.
Yeah, I think even looking at, if you look at like a podcast network,
also, sorry, as a podcast network, some of them you don't own the content. So for instance, that whole thing Spotify did recently about looking for women of color to start podcasts, a lot of Black women applied, but they don't own that. They're never going to own that show that Spotify ultimately produced. And I don't know why people were surprised because Spotify is producing it. So Spotify owns it. Yeah. I'm co-creating. I don't want to own your show unless it's inherent or explicit right up front that the show that I'm creating it. I just need talent.
I think what he's kind of getting at is there is value in, if you look at it like from a radio network perspective.
Yes.
So like disc jocks, they don't own the content that they produce on whatever radio station that they're on. Absolutely. And that radio station can then syndicate it to any market, regardless of whether you're in it. So if you look at a network from that perspective, in terms of being able to distribute it elsewhere. So if you have, but then it comes in line with, well, what are your goals? If you're trying to be a media personality, you just need a platform that's already built in. But if you're trying to be the media platform, then that's going to be a conflict of interest. So if you can approach either situation with open arms, but as long as you're aware of what you're signing up for. And then not only that, if you're a newer network, essentially, you're going to be dealing with issues of, is this in line with my brand? Is this, what I really want? Then, like, we all want to kind of execute when it's fun and exciting, but think about how you want to walk away from it. If I stop my podcast tomorrow, it's not going to stop anything else, and no one is going to. I mean, like this is for like 2 seconds, but they'll find something else to watch. Whereas, you go into this whole network thing and you don't, then what do you do after you walk away?
Yeah.
So I think it's been very helpful, especially from a journalistic perspective, to work with a network because it allows you to create without having to think about all the business aspects.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to worry about ad time. You don't have to worry about risk. You just have to promote it like crazy. But you don't own the network. So if at any given day the network says we're shutting down, they can decide whether to give you that content or not.
So one thing, I had a client once, because as a project manager, and also a digital strategist, he had a t-shirt company that was completely separate from his podcast. And the crazy part was that he had 2 different websites. They were 2 different entities. And so I shot with him for like the first week, and then I was like, hey, do you want my input now? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So I saw that you were doing commercials for Dollar Shave Club on your podcast. But yet you have a t-shirt company. Why aren't you actually promoting your t-shirts? If you're interviewing people, why aren't you giving them t-shirts and then have them put it on their social media?
That's what I do.
Social the hashtags. On your websites, why don't you have interlocking links that can actually bring you from the t-shirt company to the podcast, and your podcast to your t-shirt company? And so then we had so we had some real work to do because he was producing great podcasts, he was producing great quality, he was doing interviews every now and then. But I'm like, you make t-shirts. You make t-shirts for other companies, but then you also make t-shirts that are part of your brand. Why don't you actually, give them a t-shirt, have them actually support it on their social medias, but they can actually help your brand, and you can actually get, more of a clientele. So, these are things that I help with and stuff like that. I'm promoting myself a little bit, but oftentimes people think they don't know what to do with the podcast because they think it's like the wild, wild west, where it is very much so open. You have a lot of opportunities, but you have to make your own opportunities and actually kind of take advantage of the fact that if you have a friend who has a particular product or service, promote them. And they might give you a percentage every time they be like, hey, use discount code, Kerry-Ann, and all of a sudden, every time they go like, yeah, Kerry-Ann, introduce me to someone, via email or whether it's actually on their, through the MailChimp on the website or whether it's a phone call, they know to actually credit. And that's what you call bartering.
So this is actually the reason when you think about podcasting, if it's brand extension, right? So he's not a podcast, he's a t-shirt company that so happens to have a podcast. And you have, and you can't just start it just to start it. You, like Mikelah said, you have to think of like big picture. How does this fit into my brand? How do these brands talk to each other? So Carry-On Friends over here, Breadfruit Media over here, Carry-On Friends the blog over here. Do they all make sense? Yes, they do. They're separate brands. They're technically 2 separate brands, but they are, what's the word I'm looking for? They complement each other, right? And that is how, you kind of lessen the work time in between the 2. But I think the challenge is everybody's doing podcasts and everybody jumps on it. So even my experience last year, I had the opportunity to produce a podcast for a very successful brand. And they wanted to do a podcast because everyone was doing it. They had the money, they paid me to do it. We had a great time. I was editing it and they were like, why don't you be a guest? So I was this guest. I went from editing their show or producing their show to being a host on their show. And they were responsible for the marketing because they had it's a really popular brand, great. But the show was never promoted. It's sitting in iTunes to this day. And I don't know if anyone has downloaded or listened to it. Why? Because they were doing it because it was easy. They could have paid the money because they're a startup doing great, but they never really connected how this podcast fit into their overall brand. And that is where I know now, like, I know the brands I will work with. You could have the money out the wazoo. I'm not going to take it because your podcast fading and sitting somewhere and not doing anything is still a bad reflection on me.
Like a one-off.
Right.
One-off
So
podcast,
it just, and they were great. They had a great time. They still say, oh my God, Kerry-Ann, you're the best. But from that experience, it told me you can have the money to pay for my services, but if you haven't figured out how this podcast or audio or digital voice or whatever fits into your overall brand and strategy, it's not going to work. And I want to be part of something that you see it's working, you have that energy, and it's not just a fad and new, because once that newness wears off and you realize that it's really hard work, it's going to do what we call pod fading. Yes, that's a term that people call pod fading. You come out, bang, I got a podcast. It's not getting 10,000 downloads out the gate. You're disappointed because everyone is like, oh, I have 1 million downloads. Especially when you're niche, it doesn't really work that way. I'm hyper-focused on being a niche within my niche. I'm digging my heels into my Caribbean community because I went to, so remember I told you someone told me to forget my Caribbean platform, forget this. They were one half Caribbean, right? But they didn't grow up in the culture the way we did. So they could say that. I went to this podcast and this man with his horse radio network was like, this is absolutely the greatest idea. This is what you call it, Caribbean Podcast Network, Immigrant Podcast Network. I sat there and I was like, domain bought, domain bought, domain bought. Because within 2 minutes of having this conversation, it's like, absolutely, yeah, niche, Zoom, focus. Don't worry about these numbers. Don't worry about these numbers. Focus, Zoom. And I was just like, all right. And so if you are worried about numbers, there are other people. And he came up with exciting, creative ways to do podcasts. And that's kind of where I was like, oh, it was almost reinvigorating, like pumping new life into me as to, oh, you can totally do this. You've been already doing this, and how to make money from it. So if you're having conversations with people about digital voice and podcasts that aren't in the space, like I said, to innovate, you have to be in it to know where to innovate. So he was in it to know that, oh, you totally should do a network, or you totally should do a production for other people because it's needed in this space. And I was the only person walking around in there. They're like, tell me about this Caribbean. And I was having, oh, that's very interesting, because it becomes now a source for people like, oh, you know this innovator, you know this entrepreneur. It's like the network thing. Oh, I listened to this. So it's don't shy away from your niche, whatever that is. I went to podcasting and talking about the benefits of being a niche within a niche, because the niche is really people of color. And then you have me being a woman, and then you have me being Caribbean. Not a lot of people are really doing that. And the more voices you get into the space, the harder it is for people to ignore the stories that are coming out. To me, stories. I already know what I want. I'm just hoping to find people who are ready for it. And I'm so ready for this.
So sort of brings me.
Go ahead.
Are there any questions on the Facebook? If there are, let us know.
If you guys have any questions, if they can hear us. If you guys have any questions, put it in the chat. If you have any questions.
I just sort of wanted to mention how you was mentioning about focus on the numbers and the numbers, and he was also mentioning about ads and sponsors. Instead of necessarily focusing on those things, focus on building your brand and growing your followers. And when you have followers, instead of looking to outside people to fund you, then you can market your own products, whether it's digital or physical, and then without relying on them, you can be successful. It's long, but you can be successful that way instead of relying on outside.
It's nurturing, it's like a really long-term nurturing of your audience. And the thing is, I tell them, if we keep jumping ship because they're not responding right away, it's going to reset it and make it harder for the next person who comes behind, who tries to do the same thing. And it is like sticking with it is really because they haven't been used to it or been consistent with it, because we keep having to reset or reintroduce them to new brands because we keep jumping ship and we haven't. It's like Soka Mom said this on one of her chats, and I agree. It is like, focus on your niche, because that was focus on your niche, but figure out how on the side, you appeal to your larger audience, a more global audience, which is kind of what I've been doing. Like, you kind of have this conversation over here and you stay in your lane, but I also can be part of bigger conversations. So, you know, so how would I look? So I went to podcast movement last year. No one in that space, or maybe a handful of people in that space, like maybe Tree Bridgery and 5, and a Haitian and another, like literally like a handful of Caribbean people were like, hey, but the majority of my audience were not in that space. But I was able to connect and show expertise to people who are not in the space. I think
Yeah.
So I have a question, right? And so I think about it not by podcast, but audio content. Audio content. And you have a niche market, so we can use your Kerry-Ann friends as an example. Being audio content and you focusing on a Caribbean niche market, is there a possibility to use that audio content on maybe a radio station in, say, Jamaica? Because that would apply, and that would have so many different open up so many different marketing avenues for you, because you'd be providing something that they just physically couldn't, having access to people in a location like here. Like, how could that work? And I don't think anybody would be doing that now.
So
but what's the opportunity?
they're actually doing it. They do it in a. So I used to work at a radio station, and we used to have the people in Jamaica record the Jamaican news, and we would play it. So it's essentially
So it went this way.
We would play it this way. So it's essentially the same model, but on the reverse. So it's the challenge that we have is more or less old school, new school, and being able to break the barrier to say that this is valuable content, pay for it on the reverse. Or if we barter it, how can we make this a mutual? Because this content would be valuable to her because she would be able to push it to a whole new market. But they would essentially be getting all of the stats, all of the listens, all of the sponsorship. And if they're unwilling to either share or partner in some way that's valuable to both parties, that's essentially the challenge. And most of Caribbean radio essentially is owned by a small number of people. And not only that, just
one rich white person.
I don't know. I can't really say because I don't know like the specific players, and it varies from island to island.
Yeah. It's a conglomerate,
but it's really syndication. That's all it really is in that sense. So essentially, I think the person that I know that has been doing this from the music front is Nikki C. Yeah. So she has this top 20 countdown that she syndicates to radio in like Gambia and here in New York, but it plays on stations that are not owned by any one of us, but they're her personal relationships that she's built over time. So that definitely is a model that can be replicated. It just takes some more time to massage. And the more that of us that we are in the space, there's this other podcast. And quite literally, I was just telling Kerry about it. It's an entertainment podcast as well called Make the Fix. Yeah. And they were actually on radio in Jamaica at UWI. So they literally were the youngest people on the radio programming, and they literally took the content and it's on YouTube now. But their views on YouTube. So when they separated from the radio station, and they kind of discussed why they separated from the radio station, and I'm looking at their stats. Their stats are crazy. They have like 100,000 views per episode, and it's like 2 hours, and they're not like small, they're big interviews. So I'm like, why are they having trouble finding sponsorships? But they're focusing, most of their audience is here, because I guarantee you the people that are in the Caribbean or in Jamaica aren't listening to that whole interview. We want it because we don't have it. So it's almost like they have to switch their mindset. So just as much as we're trying to reach back to them, they're someone that essentially could probably reach out to and say, hey, you have more opportunity here than you do there. And you know how Caribbean people are. You get one Red Bull sponsor here. Ray and nephew is coming. They like, okay, now you're about that.
I was on Uber Eats the other day, and I had to put this on Instagram. But this is the first time I'd ever seen a major organization. They gave me a $5 discount because it was Caribbean Week. or something like that. And I have never seen that before. But I think that the opportunity for marketing could be closer, close. So I'm sorry.
No, it's right. The actual, so to Michaela's point, I'm not marketing to the Caribbean specifically because, I've had a lot of research. I think I've shared it with some people where, the app, being the mobile society it is and the apps and everything, they're not really heavy listeners. So when I look at my stats, 70-80% of my audience is US based. A little bit comes from Jamaica, a little bit comes from Trinidad, a little bit comes, but the majority is US, Canada, UK, not much from the Caribbean. And I know people in the Caribbean who started podcasts, but they pod faded. It was too much. And they really don't have the listener because they're trying to penetrate this market, not the other way around. And so then the challenge becomes they're figuring out who are they going to get on this side to advertise while we're still trying to figure out who on this side will want the value of the audience. So that's kind of where the biggest challenge is, not just for podcasters niche like us, but podcasters of color or smaller podcasts, because they're really the big dogs. And the reality is NPR, Gimlet, all these, they have like maybe 89, almost 90% of the market share when it comes to the ads or the revenues, because they're the ones producing the big shows. They're the ones creating all these, they have the bandwidth and they have investor money. I don't have investor money. Gimlet has series, I don't know what series they're going through right now, but that's what we compete against. But I don't try to compete against them because I know the value of the stories we have to tell. I just have to find people who are willing to partner with me so I can create the avenue for them to tell those stories.
Yeah, some of your best podcasts, my favorite one was Jesse Owens talking about product management.
It was the best.
You can say it, you were on it. It was yours, and it wasn't like a one or two of it. It was an episode.
Yeah,
and it was basically it was like a master class for me because I sat there with a pen and paper. I was like, yep, that's actually right because I did product management. And I'm seeing the product management manager aspect from this side, this perspective, and you were asking all the right questions. And I'm like, it's like a master class. You should do this more often.
So let me tell you on that. What was that?
You guys branched off and stuff.
Well, we try to, right? And that's the thing. We tried to do a class with it. No one kind of really signed up.
All right. So, because I'm Georgie, I like to get stuff done. I tried to produce a class with Jesse and Kerry-Ann being like the teachers. It'd be a live class. They would do like the whole thing, expanding on the podcast. We were trying to reach out to some folks to kind of see who would be interested in before we did like a mass marketing. No one was biting. No one, of course it would cost money because again, their time and their knowledge they're trying to share. When you put a price tag on things, people don't participate. People don't show up. They don't do it. And it's just like, at the same time, people don't want free. If it's free, I don't want it. It's not valuable. So it's just like, so what do you want? Do you want the free or do you want the knowledge? What do you want? So
video send that Sylvia something by email people on your.
Well, we can get to that in a little bit. But one thing about that episode with Jesse, and this is something that I want to tell everyone, the value of your audio, digital voice is never in the celebrities. Yeah. Jesse is a product manager at MasterCard, and his episode is the most downloaded episode to this day. Well, the first one he did on his career, and then subsequently, it's always the people who have very connected audiences who share the story because they are excited, they get a voice. And those are the stories that you tell. If you notice, I stay away from celebrities. I look for people who are doing something that, this is going to be known, like Randy, this is going to be known, he's going to be on this show. Because my thing is, you remember early MTV when they did MTV News with Tabitha? MTV News, you heard it first. Carry-On Friends, you heard it first. Because I'm not looking for the big people to give me the numbers. And every time I see people advertise numbers, I remind myself, I could get those numbers if I was producing a show every week. I produce a show twice a month. I could get those numbers if I was having big celebrities on my show. I refuse to have those big celebrities on my show.
So if a big celebrity came on, you wouldn't have them?
It depends on who the celebrity is. If it's Usain Bolt, I'll accept you. Because everybody, even my child, knows that, oh my God, when Usain She goes, ah! So very few people, and I wouldn't talk to you saying about anything but PE and school and just like things that I know he recalls coming from that side of Jamaica, but it's the everyday stories of everyday people that makes the connection. I always say there's a chasm between Oprah and myself. It's aspirational, but I won't get to Oprah stuff. People want to hear about people like, oh my God, like Ravi lives in Queens and he's doing this. What am I doing? We can do this too. That's what incites people to action, right? Not like, oh, they're a celebrity, they could pay to have staff, and, because already you are looking at their benefits and tune out. It's like, of course they could do this. But if, you know, Jesse, who has a job, he's working, you know, and he does this, and yeah, I want to listen. I want to know how he's doing. So I want to tell more stories because I've never seen more storytellers than Caribbean people. Like, she doesn't know it yet, but I have an idea for her right here. Yes.
That's a boom.
Yes, I'll make us a boom. If you've never read her dollar band stories, you need to read these dollar band stories because guess what? I know these stories, even though I don't take the dollar bands anymore. I absolutely know these stories. But this is what people want to see. People want to see,
Not that gentrified.
but people, here's the key. People want to see themselves, and if they don't have the voice, you with the voice have to tell the stories that they live. Like one of the best episodes in terms of feedback was the one we talked about being Caribbean American in the office. Like everybody talks about an episode like, yes, they ask about my curry, or yes, they talk about the oxtail and the, because everyone can relate to that. Someone coming over your food and like, what's that? You know, or you're Jamaican, you smoke weed, or you know, like these things.
Or say something in patois.
Say something in
No, say something in Jamaican.
Jamaican, yes. Say something in Jamaican.
It's not patois. So it's like people are like, oh, it's not just me. One person was like, I'm the only Black person in the office. So when you
And you say Trinidad, and you're like,
What?
oh, yes, man. Wrong island.
So these are important when you're connecting like the stories that people want to see themselves. And you know, in terms of marketing, or people are funny, they are picky. We don't know. Today they want to job. Tomorrow they're like, listen, I just want to go to sleep. And if you think about it, Caribbean people go off their energy and their feelings. So if we can't understand what energy they're feeling today, like we're just like, oops, I don't know what to do. And that is the inherent challenge because we sit here and you talk the truth. I don't feel like this today, you know. And all right, that's it. So yes. So we can always talk about this more, but I was just excited to talk to you guys about, you know, audio, voice, content, continue this conversation.
That thing you went to, let's find out more about podcasting. Where is that?
So podcast movement, I'm not going this year because I'm using the time. And this is the thing about conferences, right? When you go to conferences, you need time to actually do the work from conferences. And believe it or not, a year isn't enough. So they're in Philly this year in a couple of weeks. So yeah, it ain't changed. So all right, so
investment, but
it's worth it. So, but I'm thinking of doing a mini Caribbean podcast movement if anyone's interested. And with that, I'm gonna wrap it up.
Okay.
So I'm gonna wrap up for today. Thank you guys for coming to day 2 of CITE Week. This is the second annual CITE Week. We're trying to make this a yearly event, so you know, when 5-6 years from now, when we're having this in the room packed and it's a very expensive event, then you can say, I was there first. You'll have your founding members and participant discounts. So you'll be good to come. The next event that we have for CITE Week is not going to be tomorrow. We are not having Wednesday anymore. It was supposed to be pitches and patties. It's going to be now just Thursday. We're mixing Pure Vibes with pitches and patties. So Thursday is going to be the next event. It's going to be literally right down the block at 25 Broadway. So you can walk. It's walking distance from here. Yeah, Charging Bull. That's where we had one of like the first meetups that we ever did with, like the first big meetups that we had with CITE. Again, it's a free event. So tell your friend, tell a friend, come through. I'm gonna be putting the video from this section up in on YouTube and sharing the link with everybody. So we have Monday's talk on YouTube already, so I'll share that link, and then we'll have today's talk on YouTube as well. Yeah, so just come through. I hope you guys learned a lot. CITE Collective. If you go to citecollective.com or citeweek.com, that's how you share the information so that other folks will come. They don't have to be Caribbean. They can just be an ally that loves the Caribbean and wants to come out to support. We're trying to make Thursday like a really big night. We have about 10 people demoing. Mikelah is running that night with Ravi as well. And it's gonna be fun. It's called Pure Vibe. So there's gonna be music, food, ice cream, alcohol, like not just the wine, like, you know, there's gonna be a lot of nice, fun things. And to support those efforts, you guys on the chat as well, I keep telling everybody, CITE is a community effort, right? So the wines that I bought is through what folks are donating to the PayPal. So we have a PayPal account. That's what we use to buy, like, you know, the food and the snacks for the events. It's paypal.me/CITE Collective. And you can choose whatever amount you want to donate. That's how we make sure, you know, a little something is here, because ain't nobody's rich. So support. Yes, you know.
You should put that on when they pay.
All right, so you guys don't gotta go home. I'm going home. So thank you so much for day 2 at CITE. Thanks so much, Kerry-Ann. Yeah, you guys can stick around until Colleen from WeWork kicks you guys out. I definitely. Please eat the rest of the food. I'm gonna end this chat.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
And if you got, like, you sent out our emails, if you guys have,
Well, I did not. So we created a Slack off of the